Trustee Hutchins is not with us today. He's been detained. So I will be chairing the meeting, and Trustee DeGroot is in Victoria and medical appointment, so will likely not arrive by the end of the meeting. And hopefully Trustee Doman is on his way. So I'll call the meeting to order and say I squale siem na siepya. I nas walaway Juanas ilam nala. I respectfully on our behalf acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and unceded lands of the Coast Salish people where we live, learn, and play. A motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Trustee Thorne, seconded by Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving to minutes of January 29th, 2019, Board Education and Business Committee meeting. Looking for a mover to adopt the minutes. Moved by Trustee Kemmler, seconded by Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving through the action list, you see that there's one item there which has been completed. So moving to item 5, petitions and delegations, and we have a delegation of Erica Roberts.
It's actually my colleagues, but
and
I'm just being
Chris Rolls, and colleagues, and students are all here.
This is actually a CDTA presentation, so I'm not part of this one.
Thank you for clarifying that. So, Erica, would you like to?
Thanks, I'm gonna ask Nick to
Sweet.
come up and
Where
start.
do you want me to stand, over here?
Right down here.
At the end would be
Great, okay.
helpful for us. Thank you.
So I know no phones to school, but I actually have my speech on my So hello everyone. I'd just like to personally respectfully acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Cowichan people. It's so nice to see you all here. I know many of you, but for those that I don't, my name is Nick Richardson. My pronouns are him, he, and his, and I'm a teacher in School District 79. I'm also one of the current members of the executive committee with the Cowichan Teachers District Association. And I'm here along with a very passionate group of teachers and students to ask for the board's approval, partnership, and assistance in successfully creating our Rainbow Crosswalks project. Our goal is to see all 20 schools in the district have rainbow crosswalks painted somewhere on their school properties. And have students at each school take part in the painting of these crosswalks. Rainbows are a symbol of the LGBTQ community, and rainbow crosswalks have become a way for towns and cities to show support and acceptance for the queer people living in them. We want to recognize and value the diversity found within our school communities and believe in each individual's ability to contribute to the strength of the district's culture. In Policy 16, the board recognizes its responsibility to provide a safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment for all students and their families, employees, and volunteers, including those who identify as or are perceived to be LGBTQ. This project is that responsibility being carried out into action. As a strategic implementation, our district can ensure that students and their families, employees, and volunteers who identify as are perceived to be LGBTQ are welcomed and included in all aspects of their education. This delegation has been working collectively over the past several months to make this project a reality. We are very proud to say that the CDTA has donated $500 and the BCTF under the EdMay grant has donated $2,000 to this project. The most expensive part will indeed be the painting materials. So we wanted to ensure that we have as much capital as possible to make that happen. We intend to use the $25 to pay for the paint. We are asking the district, if approved, to provide labor support from maintenance workers and take a lead in assisting the painting at all locations where the painting will be happening. Our ideal timeline would be to have them completed by the end of the school year, with one crosswalk being painted every couple of days at each location. The cost factor that will need to be discussed in it is the maintenance of the crosswalks continuing on from here as well. I hope that you can consider this project with the best intentions for all of our ST79 staff and students and everybody that falls in between. I have posed the question why you personally think the community, school district, students, teachers, and the world would benefit from having the Rainbow Crosswalks project completed in our district and on school property. Now I have a few students with me representing various GSA and Rainbow clubs throughout the district to answer that question for you today. So thank you for giving me my time here in front of all of you. Now it's time for the students to speak. And so we're going to start with Bryn, and Bryn is from Quam, and then we'll move on to Erin, and Erin is from Francis Kelsey, and then we'll wrap it up with Victoria. And Victoria is a senior student at Cal High. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nick.
All right. As you heard Nick say, I am Bryn Slidell. I'm in grade 8, and I go to Quamerton School. I personally strongly feel that distributing rainbow crosswalks throughout the district is an important step towards closing the gap between people of the LGBTQ+ community and your average everyday student and staff member. Although my school encourages a very low tolerance for homophobic behavior, I still quite often, in between classes or at lunch, hear comments that make me uncomfortable, such as, "That's so gay," or other extremely derogatory terms. Having rainbow crosswalks gives students and staff a constant reminder every time they enter or exit that school is a place to feel safe and accepted no matter what your beliefs, sexual orientation, or how you identify. The rainbow crosswalks will demonstrate the inclusiveness of SD79 and how we welcome and support individuality as well as respect and embrace differences in others. As well as being a symbol for gay pride, rainbows are just pretty. They have the power to brighten everyone's day, and who doesn't need something to put a smile on their face? Creating these crosswalks and completing this project is a very small price for a very large statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryn. Appreciate you being able to prepare and deliver really well to us.
Thank you.
Okay, so Erin?
As Nick said, my name is Erin Jones, and for me, the reason why I feel like rainbow crosswalks are needed is for the inclusion. People spend 13 or less years at school, and they need these years to be included in everything. They need the support and all the relations to just work. And if they do not get this from their home, then school's the best place to both teach and learn on how to be yourself or how to let others be themselves. Like the rainbow and red, it's life, orange feeling, yellow sunlight, green nature, blue serenity and harmony, and violet spirit. Everyone should just be themselves whenever they feel like it. And if we don't allow them to be themselves while walking on the pride of a rainbow crosswalk, then really, what are we doing?
Thank you. Well done, Erin.
Hi, my name is Victoria Chimsa Jones. I'm a student from Cal High, and I'm a very active member in our school's GSA or Rainbow Club. I've been a part of Rainbow Club for 2 years, and it's been a really great experience. Although I personally don't identify as an LGBTQ+ member, I have many friends who do, and I am happy to be part of a group that celebrates their identities and differences. We meet once a week and always have cookies, hang out, discuss future events we want to do around school, and once a month we have a film night where it's open to all students in the district, and it's a nice opportunity to meet them and discuss our differences together. I also went to a city council meeting last year where I discussed about a rainbow crosswalk with a group of teachers and students like this one today, and we were really excited to see that it got approved, and I see many kids crossing the rainbow crosswalk in front of Cal High every single day, making it part of their daily lives. I would love that to become part of younger kids' everyday lives, to see a rainbow crosswalk, out in a public space. This would be a great conversation starter in their classes about why diversity and acceptance are important. From my perspective, as a senior student, I think there are still many people out there who are homophobic or transphobic, and this is a way that they can become educated on the topic. Having rainbow crosswalks at all of our school sites would help begin this process of educating people so they are accepting of all identities and making our schools safe for all students. I encourage you to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Well done as well. So Nick, perhaps you could come back.
Yep.
And there may be comments or questions
questions,
from
totally.
trustees. And feel free to call on students as you wish.
Yeah.
Okay, trustee
Yeah.
Taylor.
How many schools now have rainbow crosswalks on their property?
On school properties,
Yes.
none.
None.
None. There is, so, I'm sorry, let me take that back, I apologize. There's one, and it's in Lake
Kelsey
Howardton, and,
Kelsey has.
yeah, Kelsey has, and that's on the school property, so there's one on school property. The one that Victoria was referring to is the one, like, across the street between the Island Savings Center and the high school. Yeah.
And just for clarity, in your request, are you requesting on-site or are you requesting however it works the best? Like
Yeah.
couch and secondary level,
On-site.
on-site?
On-site, yeah. So it would be, I'm assuming we own those properties, right? And so there would be no having to like circumvent or discuss with,
Municipalities or
yeah,
direct
totally,
use.
right? So it would be our sole decision to do that, yeah.
I'm gonna sneak in here because I have a little bit more information.
Okay.
At our staff rep assembly the other day, we discussed this with our staff reps to let them know we were going forward and that we would be meeting with you today. There are several school grounds that do not have crosswalks at all on the property, but would like a rainbow crosswalk somewhere. And so if there are schools that do not have them, to find a place where one could be put so that a rainbow crosswalk could be painted down. And teachers are excited about this. If it goes forward, they'd love to use it as a conversation starter for lesson plans. It's become part of our curriculum, as you know. And so we've tried as the CDTA to give out our stickers. We have rainbow stickers through our social justice department, but we want more. So any of the schools that don't have a crosswalk have been letting me know they would like one.
Okay, thank you. And trustee Doran?
I want to say thank you to all of you for your presentation. I love the rainbow crosswalk. I see the one at Cow High when I drive by, and
Yeah.
it stands out.
Yeah.
And again, one of the other reasons, because there's a lot of schools who don't have crosswalks, the white seems to fade a lot faster than the rainbow color.
Mm.
I think it's representative more to me than people understand, because you look in this room, there's an array of different nationalities. There's a different array of sizes of each of us here, and I think rainbows just sort of make you feel good. And I think it's a good idea, and they're happy colors. They kind of, when I go that way, I can see that. How come I can't see the other ones during the winter time? Or when I go to Kohima, I think they're good, but they could be better. The reflection, the colors stand out. So I really want to thank all of you kids. And in my family, I have a granddaughter that's different, and that's okay. But I understand what she had gone through, and getting people to understand her situation, her position, her choice made sense.
Yeah.
And I still love her that much more, because it took courage for her to do what she did in her years. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. That's all I wanted to say.
That's great, thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Trustee Croft?
Just wanted to say thank you very much. You had me at rainbow. It's sort of been in the back of my mind. Wouldn't it be lovely if some initiative like what you're talking about came up? And I just think we can all be very proud to have rainbows at all of our schools. And certainly they remind us of LGBTQ, but I think they remind us of common values and really, I don't know, to be of one about a good thing. Anyhow, it's just lovely to run into something without a downside.
Totally,
Thank you.
awesome, you're welcome, thank you.
And any further questions, trustees? Then perhaps someone would like to think about referring it to staff for some kind of a look. Trustee Campbell?
Would that be an emotion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that staff could get back to the trustees about what it would cost to provide the labor support to paint rainbows in all our school sites.
Okay, perhaps it's more than cost?
Say one
Yes, Nick?
Sorry. So I have been recently talking with Sherwin-Williams, and we were talking about just the paint availability is how I started out with. They're able to create road grade paint for all the colors. They gave me that guarantee that they would be able to do it. However, I don't think that our $2,500 is going to cover the cost of all of the paint. However, I was interested in asking Sherwin-Williams if they could be some community partners and think about maybe donating some of that paint. However, that's something that we could discuss further if the district has a paint provider that we wish to go with or something like that, right? Then that's where we can use the money. We haven't put it all in some of these things yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion.
Do you want me to change it slightly?
Yes, but just hang on a second.
Okay.
Okay, motion on the table. Is there a seconder? Trustee Thorne. Okay, and back to Trustee Kemble. Would you like to make a friendly amendment to the motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it came from. So this is what a brand new trustee looks like, just in case it was wondering.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Trustee Thorne.
I know it's a bit early for discussion, but I'm hoping that I can get a letter. There is an organization made up of consisting of construction companies, they're called HEART. And they love doing projects that would help many. So I would like to suggest that someone give a letter that I can present, or I can get their address and stuff for you, and you can send it directly yourself.
Yeah, that'll be.
Thank you for your input. We do have a motion on the table though, and we need to deal with that. I think if we refer it to staff for, a look at not only the cost, but possible locations and timelines for implementation, because the cost of paint is one of the pieces, but there are redirection of our maintenance people, which would be another implication for the district. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that we add something to the motion that extends the view, so that we don't just get the cost of paint, but in fact we get the complete
And
picture.
I wasn't clear, I actually was thinking more labor than paint, so I would amend the motion that staff get back to us and how and if this could be done, and what would it look like timelines and cost-wise for the labor.
Okay, and that, are
Too
you,
convoluted? You can
are
do it.
we,
Fix it.
the superintendent has something to add, and then Trustee Crop?
I'm just wondering if the motion could simply be to direct staff or ask staff to work with the CDTA group to develop a plan. That we can come back and sort of talk about all those different things and figure out how we're gonna.
Absolutely. That sounds good.
Okay, so then, can we vote on the first motion, which I understand we will defeat, and then move to a second motion? Does that work for people? Okay, so, all those in favor of the first motion? Those opposed?
Oh,
Okay, and now we have a second motion coming, which, Ms. Cameron, would you like to
Ask
put that?
staff to please work with the CDTA to implement this project.
To
implement
Plan.
plan
this.
plan.
Bring a plan back.
Bring a plan back. Okay, moved by Trustee Campbell, seconded by Trustee Crum. Any further conversation? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to education, superintendent, please.
Well, we'll just pause for a moment in case.
The superintendent
People
is
want to
allowing
flee.
his staff and students to go.
They're welcome to stay, however.
Trustee Campbell, would you ready to join us, please? Thank you. Okay, moving to item 6, superintendent.
Madam Chair, Claire, are we able to move this over to table 1?
Oh, yeah.
Take over the screen, if I may. It's looking hopeful.
It just takes a bit to find it.
For the next portion of the agenda, we're going to talk about enhancing student learning framework, both from a district perspective. We're going to start with a bit of a quick district perspective, followed by 2 schools. As the board is aware, our plan is to bring a school or 2, hopefully at least to HBEBC, and it will probably take us about a year to work through all the schools, so that schools can come and present their framework, how they're thinking about organizing their planning over the next, over the next year. Couple things to remember off the start. This is new. This format of planning is a bit different for us, and because you're going to see plans at various stages during the year, you won't always see a completed plan. You will see, you might, if it's in, depending when in the year it is, but you might also see plans that are a bit more fluid, which is great, because as we all know, planning is actually a relatively fluid opportunity to think about our learning. So, Cheryl.
I'm just gonna jump up here to Riley's spot, but I'll move if he comes. So a couple of years back, actually not that long ago, the ministry started looking at this framework for enhancing student learning and started looking at it through a different lens. Less around, thank you, although I don't know what to do with this. but
Right
it's
hand
okay. Less around compliance and more around how do we make these plans more meaningful? How do we bring more people to the table to really make these plans work? Oh, sorry, wrong one. Because this is who we're doing it for, right? This isn't for the ministry. This is for the kids in our schools, and so it needs to look different. And so they came up with these 4 pillars of a framework, kind of maybe hard to see, but basically what they're looking at is a system-wide focus, and that it broadens it away from just the intellectual, and it is now includes, so it's really looking at the whole child, including the whole human and social or social-emotional aspect, as well as career development. The other piece is that it's multi-year, and that it's updated annually. And I think the intent here as well is that the plan isn't to be recreated every year. The plan is more organic, and that it's going to evolve as the year evolves, and as teachers in schools and community are sort of working through. Meaningful evidence is there as well. And when we're looking at the evidence, we're also thinking about who the plan is reflecting. That the plan is again focused on the students, and but that they're asking us to sort of also think about specifically how are we supporting our Aboriginal students, how are we supporting children in care, and how are we supporting students with special needs. In terms of the evidence piece, they're looking for as well, and what they're asking is that when we're with our reports, if we can also be specifically looking at evidence around those, around all students, but pulling out information in those pieces as well. The, sorry, I can move my slide over for my notes. The other, I think the big difference with this as well is that it's really meant to be system-wide, but it really allows for individualized school focus. So what's happening for that school and the needs for that particular school, that's what the plan is really going to reflect. And when you start to see the different schools coming on the various days, I think you'll see that none of these plans look the same, that these plans are all very, very, very different. And that's a good thing, because I think it's reflecting their clientele and their students and the needs of that school. And the framework allows for that individuality, allows for that flexibility, to be there as well, to be a part of that. The other piece that, and I think I've sort of talked about this a little bit as well, is that part of this is sort of the system-wide capacity building, and again, that speaks to the individual schools and them focusing on where they're at and where their needs are. The other really important piece about this is that the teachers are participating in the process. Teachers are a part of this. Chris and Erica, they were sitting at the tables with us. We had CUPE sitting at the table with us as well. The invitation was out with USW. They chose not to join us, but that's all right. So we right from the get-go had full participation from all of our member groups. I'll give you your chair back, Randy. So I'm gonna.
Come, Mike, Cheryl.
No. Sure. Where am I at? So the teachers, so all partner groups have been involved with this framework right from the get-go, which I think is really, really important. And just to really reiterate that the focus is on the students, and that the plans, when they're done, they're for the school community. They're not necessarily, well, they aren't. They're not being reported to the ministry. They are reported out to the school communities. And I think
So maybe I'll just jump in a little bit.
absolutely.
So,
We're a
finely
well-oiled
tuned machine. And if you recall back 2-3 years ago, we had Dean Goodman from the ministry come up with Dave Dirksen and present this framework to the board. It hasn't changed from then, but it's sort of maturing. So this is the provincial structure they've asked us to work inside. This provincial structure was also developed quite collectively, with lots of consultation, lots of communication, lots of conversations with folks around the province. And if you, I guess it was only Candace and Jason and I, but if we think to the ministry's presentations at the end of last week, when Keith Godin, the new ADM who's in charge of all this stuff, he was talking very much about the meaningful part. How do we make this a meaningful process with meaningful information that we can make good decisions from? It's not a hoop to jump through.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be a compliance piece. It's meant to be meaningfully used by districts and by schools. So that means it has to be individualized, as Cheryl said, personalized school by school and district by district. No two district plans are looking anything alike in the province. And that's a good thing, because no two districts are alike. There's common themes. You should see things starting to develop in each plan around Indigenous students. You should start to see things in each plan around children in care, and so on, as those evolve out. But there's common criteria, but not a common framework or model, and that's intentional, and that's a really good thing. And over the course of the year, as you hear from our schools, you won't see any two alike. That's a good thing, but you should be able to pull some common threads out.
So how are we approaching it? So we looked at it there was interesting conversations around how to approach it. And originally, we did start off with the traditional, well, we need to have a reading goal, and we need to have a numeracy goal, and whatnot. But we just kept thinking, is that really what we want? Is that really what we need? And is that really gonna get us where we want to get? So we started looking at it through the lens of, why is this not working? We started looking at it through the lens of the what, or what's the goal? What is the what? And we landed on the educated citizen being the what, right? And realizing, especially with the redesigned curriculum, that it isn't just about the first bullet up there, which is mostly the academic piece, that really it's also about all of these other pieces, which are really highlighted in our new curriculum, we call them competencies, right? And so really the what is the educated citizen. So this became the goal, right, of our framework. And so the next piece was, okay, so that's what we want. If we want the educated citizen, how are we gonna get that? And so that we landed on the key learning environments. And so what we thought is that if we had learner-centered classrooms that were highly focused, if we had profoundly personalized classrooms, if we had classrooms that were inclusive, if we had classrooms that were social, knowing that that's how we learn, and that if we had classrooms that were in schools and districts that are structured and well-designed, that would help us to get to the educated citizen. These have come from the OECD and all of the research that they've done. Anything to add?
Just that I think by trying to focus our conversations on the what and the how, at a fairly high level, altitude, we wanted to allow schools to have the flexibility to really individualize and personalize their approach, and yet have some common pieces. So the educated citizen, as you know, comes out of the School Act. That is still our legislated job to do. Yours, mine, teachers, principals, vice principals. The School Act says that's our job, produce young people who are those educated citizens. I have I'll call it good fortune, I have the responsibility right now to sit on a group that's trying to, at a high level, puzzle out what goes in the grade 12 literacy assessment, what that should look like. And we've struggled for 3 meetings with why are we doing this? Still not quite sure I understand, but and where we landed was the educated citizen. That's what we're trying to assess. That's what we're trying to get our heads around, how you assess that. And if you look at some of those pieces of the educated citizen, like Cheryl said, it doesn't just say reading needs to go up 0.5% and whatever. Those are certainly involved in the first bullet. But how do you assess motivation? What kind of metrics do you use when you're thinking about kids being able to make independent decisions? What are the metrics? And so that's the provincial head scratch right now around the grade 12 literacies assessment, which is now becoming, how do we assess all that stuff? It's no longer a reading assessment. It's how do we get at that stuff? And how do you do that in a let's sit down and take a test? You don't. So this province is really pushing the global conversation on assessment and on how do we get our heads around that. We are very clear in this province about the what. There's a lot of agreement that it's something like that. And we're starting to get our head around the how do you assess that. That's why everybody's coming here in May to have that conversation with us from around the world about our progress on that. When you look at those things, how do you assess some of those things? Our teachers in classrooms are brilliant at that. That's what they do. They assess that stuff all the time. It's challenging sometimes to use old reporting methods to report out on that, and much easier to have conversations. It's challenging to put that onto a transcript sometimes. So there's lots of challenges, but we're pretty good at getting our heads around that. It's the other pieces of how we assess it and what our metrics are. So when you talk to Keith, the ADM of data, this is where he's puzzling. This is where their ministry's spending a ton of their time, is trying to, what are the metrics? And it's not all tests. It could be surveys. It could be all kinds of things. So we didn't want to get in the way of that, and we want to also allow our teachers and our schools and our district to have that same struggle. That's a good conversation to have. We spent many an hour trying to think through how that works. And at the same time, we should know if our kids can read, and that they can do math, and like we need to know all that stuff too. It's an and, not an instead of. So we decided on the key elements of learning environments. And this to me was based on the premise of if we don't do anything different, nothing will change. We keep doing everything the same way, finding different ways to different metrics doesn't really help if we keep doing everything the same way. So how do we provide the freedom and the permission for our teachers to do things differently and our schools to do things differently? A great deal of research out of the OECD suggests these are the key elements, that's what those classrooms should look more like. They should be more learner-centered, more profoundly personalized, inclusive, and so on. And so in conversations with our teachers and through the union and principals meetings and all the conversations that we've been having, we felt pretty good about this as the framework. So this is the how. The lower level how, so what's that really look like in a school? That's what you're gonna start to see in school plans. Right, and we'll be able to, so we'll get to the metrics slide in a second, but we want it to be, have clear enough criteria and yet enough space for that innovation to happen in schools and for that teacher excellence to come forward. And schools are now looking at those things differently, and you can't do everything all at once. So a school might say, we're gonna really focus on inclusivity. That's going to be something we think we need to get our heads around first, and we're going to spend more time on that than we are on personalizing. I don't know how you can actually do those two things separately, but find the thing that you want to focus on. Yeah, so an articulation of our district framework. We won't give you the whole thing, but has been articulated in this, and you saw this video last fall.
I think so.
A while ago. Where we took each of those elements, those key elements.
My name's Rod Allen, I'm the superintendent of schools.
Less of him, the better. And took each of those key elements and had our educators in our classrooms talk about how they are beginning to approach those things. Talk about their how. Because there's no one answer to those things. Because our teachers were asking, public was asking, everyone was saying, so what do you mean by profoundly personalized? What are some examples? Well, here's a few. And we tried to walk the line between, so that means I have to ask my kids what kind of furniture they want in their kindergarten class to be personalized? No. That might be an approach you use, as Shauna talks about in here, but it could be dozens of other things. So this is an articulation of the high-level district plan.
And we've used it too, like the poster in behind you as well for, so we're trying to articulate that plan and the pieces of it in a variety of different ways. Are you good with the video?
I am so good with the video.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you just click past it, it should disappear.
Like
Start again.
over.
It's a thing of beauty.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
So the piece on the data, the how do we know piece, is what Rod alluded to earlier. That we know that needs to be focused on the learning needs, and it needs to really reflect the community context, strength-based, etc. But that's the conversation that we're in now, and our schools are in now. So what data are we using? How do we assess? How do we know that that this is making a difference? So that's kind of where you're at, or where we're at as a district right now, is beginning to more clearly articulate that aspect of the piece of the district as well as the school plans. So they haven't been fully fleshed out, but that conversation is happening. We've had Pat McRae, had conversations with Pat McRae. We've had principals and vice principals talking to them about what kinds of data are they using for school data, because it's cyclical, right?
We've had the two directors last month came in from the ministry and met with all of our principals to talk about their new data collection and how they're thinking about evidence differently. Moving off, it's just about assessments, it's all kinds of stuff that we could use as evidence. And we've asked our schools, as Cheryl said, to start to think about what they wish they had. So to get away from it, if you only have a hammer, everything's a nail. What kind of data or evidence do you wish you had? Then let's see if we can figure out how to do that. Work with the ministry, work with other districts to figure out how we might gather that. In the meantime, we continue to gather DART assessment. We continue to do DART. We continue to gather report card marks like we've always done. The growing suspicion is that's not actually telling us as much as maybe it used to or we thought it did. There's gaps in that process. There's sometimes we have schools that are collecting it because they have to, when really they just take it and put it over here, because they're far more interested in this literacy tool or assessment over here. We're still requiring this, and which takes their attention away from that. And so that's exactly the conversation we're in, and working closely with our staff and ministry to figure out how we gather that on a school-by-school basis.
Thank you. So when we talk to schools and sort of talk to them about, okay, so what do we want to see? And again, this just mimics back to the 4 pillars that we've seen earlier, is that the school plans should be focused on the educated citizen and one or more of the 5 key learning environments. Reflect efforts to support each student, because it's student-centered, but that we need to be thinking about how are we supporting our Aboriginal students, children in care, and students with diverse learning needs. How is that being shown in the plan? Including meaningful evidence, and sometimes that isn't numbers, sometimes that evidence looks different. And also include strategies and structures that are supporting the learning plan. And we talked a lot about this piece as well. Rod will talk a little bit more, I'm sure. But we've done a lot of work with our principals and with our schools around our school plans, and while improvement is a piece of it, the other big piece that we're looking at is the transformation piece. So will this get us to transformation? And we think it will. But we recognize that each of our school plans is a bit of both, right? It isn't all about transformation, it's about improvement and transformation.
But yeah, the improvement work shouldn't get you into such a box that you can't see your way down the transformation path. Or you get so lost in the transformation at 100,000 feet, you're not continuing to think about, can my kids read, can they write, how do I know, can they problem solve, and those kinds of things. So it's a balancing act all the time.
Yeah.
But I think clearly with transformation in mind, that's the goal. We will hear when the OECD arrives, startling statistics, and Pat Duncan was here yesterday working with our principals and used the number that human knowledge is increasing at 36 months. No.
Doubling every 36 months,
No,
yes.
I think it's worse than that, about every 36 minutes. I don't know. But you know, the human knowledge doubles, and that geometric curve just goes off the charts, and we can't out-teach the facts.
36 hours.
36 hours. Human knowledge is now doubling every 36 hours. Like, how do you put it? We can't even write textbooks for that. How do you get your head around that? So, it's, do we need our kids to be critical consumers of knowledge? Do we need our kids to be able to work collaboratively and not better understand? Do we need our kids to make sense of, if you look at the new numeracy 10 assessment, which is basically what kind of math do you need to make sense of the front page of the New York Times? They're gonna have some pictures, they're gonna have some articles with numbers in it, they're gonna have some graphs in there, some graphs are gonna move around, and you elect Trump if you don't understand how all that stuff, I'm sorry, was that a political comment? How all that stuff works. And so that's a focus around assessment for transformation. If you look at the numeracy 10 assessment, that's is attempting to be an opportunity for something completely different. It's not just how's your long division, although that's still part of it, it's not the focus of it. You're right, I did talk about that. Sorry. How'd you like that?
And that's it for us.
Thank you.
So within that context, you will start to see some school plans. Our goal as a district, just like the ministry is trying to decide how they're going to approach this, is as our schools go through a cycle or two of their planning process, the role of the district is to say, so given those things, how is it we support all that? That becomes our plan. How do we support all that work? Are there some common metrics that we want across the district? I think there are. They may even be the ones we're using, but we need to retest that.
Yeah.
Is DART still the thing that is giving us the information we want collectively? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's a conversation that's alive and well. Maybe it's something else. So the district level and the school level have to be iterative. We both have to respond to each other, as opposed to we say, here's your 3 goals, and then the schools go off and do the 3 goals, but they don't really care about those 3 goals because they've got stuff that's way more important to them, and they pretend to do that jump through hoop and then do something else. So we're trying to be iterative, especially in these first few years through this. You will see a couple of
Yes.
examples.
So we've got 2 for this evening. Lisa Leclerc, and happy birthday, Lisa. It's her birthday.
Yes,
and
thank you
she's
for
here
spending your
too.
birthday with us, Lisa.
They promised 5 minutes, so just
Yeah,
kidding.
and then, and after Lisa, we've got Scott and Colleen as well.
Yeah, so do you like this?
Sure, do you want screens or anything?
No,
I'm just gonna talk some interpretive dance. Oh,
5
awesome.
minutes, yes. And I will have to just jet out after for my plans, if that's okay. So, yeah, we followed, after we had our initial sort of whole district session at the Island Savings Center in the theater, where the team sort of discussed and presented to us what the CBTA and senior management had talked about in terms of guiding what our next steps would be. We all went back to rooms that had been assigned to each school, and we started working on the plan. And I can't tell you that as I walked across from the Island Savings Center to Cowichan Secondary, I wasn't a little bit scared. I thought, okay, this is really big. This is like, it's big picture thinking that I actually really love, but how was I going to come back and work with our team and explain sort of how I had understood and interpreted this, and make sure that everyone felt that I wasn't guiding this, that this was us working together. So that was step 1, and really it came down to figuring out how we were. I thought, let's talk about what we do really well and what we're really happy with at our school. So we decided to kind of focus in on and use an appreciative inquiry model to look at where we're at right now in our school and where we want to head. So what we talked about a little bit at the beginning was our past growth plans, which were focused on academics. And what we had always struggled with is that the data that we were using, DART, report cards, district-wide rights, early success, they weren't really clearly indicating that there was a real pattern that we needed to shift. Like any school, there's diversity. So there's students that were really strong in some areas, students that needed support in other areas. But there wasn't sort of a real clear, we need to focus on this. So that had always been a struggle, and we never wanted to pigeonhole anyone into one area. So we thought this was actually kind of fun for us. So the biggest sort of project that had come up that we had been involved in school-wide that was really positive for all of our learners and where we had seen them shine, I would say the most as a whole school, was our EDAS project, our Everybody Deserves a Smile project, which Trustee Spilsbury had the good fortune of coming and witnessing this year, and all of the bags that we create for some of our community members who are disadvantaged. And the kids really, they enjoy the project, not just because it's fun and not just because it's a bit different, but they really, through the way that that project is set up, delve into the why of the project and really focus on learning a little bit more about what's going on in their own community and where the needs are and how they can have a positive impact on their community. So we kind of unpacked that and what the positive ends of that were, and we landed on empathy, and we landed on the idea that we should, as a school, focus on empathy, because when we focus on that, it leads to inclusion. It leads to profoundly personalized, because even as the adults in the building starting to understand each of the students in our classrooms, we then are being empathetic towards what their learning needs are and towards who they are as individuals. So we said, okay, well, that again is big. So we sort of framed it after that last session as, or the first session as, question. And so our question was, how can we collectively and individually contribute in a positive way to the world around us? And so we walked away from our session with that in mind. And then we started looking at the nature of learning and the key elements of learning environments. And we thought, well, how we need to now figure out how in our classrooms we're going to intentionally name this and nurture it. And so that's where we started taking, we felt like if we focused in on two key elements. We focused in on classrooms that are structured and well designed, and on environments that are profoundly social, so that we could sort of align that goal of empathy with our instructional practice in our classroom. And so by being involved in social learning, you need to be able to take the perspective of other individuals in your group, and looking at the educated citizen and the way the citizen of the future that we want to be able to create. That citizen has to be able to work collaboratively with others, and we know that from lots of the work that we're seeing in the business world as well. So the kids are really starting to understand that they need to be listeners and not just speakers when they're working in groups. And then the structured and well-designed aspect of that is we had teachers start to look into different types of frameworks that they can use in their class to be able to guide students along that path. So the design thinking process is one that the teachers have really kind of jumped on board with, which is great because that's also about transformation. And one of the key elements of the design thinking process is thinking about your end user. And so as teachers embark on projects now in their classroom, they're looking at empathy, and they're naming it again in their projects, and trying to ensure that the kids are, they're reminding the kids and that they understand that they have to think of others as they're building projects and learning. And so in order for the kids to then take that empathy piece and apply it to everyday life, they came up, the metrics was the hard part. So we decided to, at our last two PLC sessions, to come up with a way of doing a pre-assessment of where students are at now. And so we landed on rubrics, and the rubrics are really interesting because they change. The teachers got together in grade levels and started developing sort of initial rubrics and color coding them. But even based on the children's initial self-assessments and the wording used in some of these rubrics, the teachers are realizing that we even have to dig deeper and change the language even more in these rubrics, because the children hear the word empathy all the time, but having a true sense of what it means for them as citizens in the world around them is really difficult. So the older grades went back to the performance standards, social responsibility performance standards, and in the solving problems in a peaceful way, it says specifically what one of the most important aspects of empathy is, and it's perspective taking. And so when we talk to kids in our classes about any sort of conflict that they have at recess, or even in literature that we're reading, or in any art projects that we're doing, in speaking about Aboriginal perspectives in our classes, we're constantly using the word empathy and pulling it out of everything that we're doing in our classwork in the school. So that's really having a positive impact on not just the way the children view themselves and the way that they interact with other kids at the school, but it's also helping us with designing our instruction in the classroom, because it means that when I have difficult conversations with teachers, when we're having sort of these issues that kind of swell up with certain students, we actually ourselves have to own what we say our goal is, and we have to sit back and we have to think about the perspective of the child now. How is that child feeling right now? Because it's our responsibility to try and support that child on their learning journey and move them through that. And so it's actually woven its way into everything that we're doing at the school now. The other thing that we've started doing is we decided as a school that we're going to build a tree at the entranceway, and so that the kids can start identifying when they see empathy in other children demonstrating empathy, they'll be getting a leaf with the name of the child that they want to give the leaf to, and then that child will start putting a leaf, and we want to see it budding in the school as another way of sort of celebrating it. And we brought our parents on board by speaking to it in multiple newsletters, not every time, but every few months we address it. And at the last PAC meeting, we shared videos, Brene Brown videos on empathy and vulnerability, and showed sort of parents what we're doing as well, and train them so that they can speak to their children using the same vernacular and terminology that we're using at the school. So it's messy in the sense that it doesn't sound like academics and numbers, but it's really it's just having a great impact on the school, and it's great conversation, and it's really focusing us in on something that we think has had some really positive impacts on the school environment. So that's us so far.
Thanks, Lisa. We would normally have 2 and then questions, but I know Lisa's trying to get out of here. Do you have any quick questions for Lisa on what she's doing or talking about, or?
Yeah, go for it. I can.
And just a comment, right now I'm feeling taken aback. Everything you're talking about, and a lot of you have heard the term Snowiath by my people, the teachings. I just want to congratulate you, because you guys are now at the door where you've learned to listen. And you've listened to learn. And now you're sharing. You're now coming into the world of Snowiath. So what's that? To all of you, I say thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Just a question, how long have you been working on this plan?
So when we started, was it 2 years ago, Rod, that we did? 2? Yeah.
September, the previous September, not this last one, but the one before, we had a district day.
Yeah. So we're in a year and a half in now.
And you're just getting deeper as the time goes on?
Deeper and deeper, and realizing how woven this is into everything that we do as educators, and how important it is, not just for the kids, but for parents and teachers, and all the adults as well.
If I may.
Yes.
Lisa, what do you said this wasn't about, you might be surprising, it's not about sort of academics. What do you expect the impact will be? Or what impact are you starting to see? They're somewhat related.
Yeah, the impact on school. So the interesting thing was, it was frustrating at times for the teachers, because we needed to have, the focus needs to be really clear for them of what, we have our 2-hour early dismissals, and they really want to know what they're going to do and how we're going to do this. And we have a committee, and they really want to make that time effective and productive. And so what we're seeing is the time is now being spent on, now that we've got these rubrics, on designing lessons with one another that are highly differentiated. We're bringing Shelley Moore's 5 more minutes into our PLC sessions now, and then we're building our classroom instruction around understanding children more, and we're feeling like we're catching them at this. We're always talking about meeting learners where they're at and helping them move forward, and so we're all feeling very positive about this, that this is having sort of that effect of moving learning forward, but approaching it just through a different angle. So I think it's going to have positive effects on academics as well. It has to, because it's about learners.
It's wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you having fun doing that?
I love it. And speaking of the rainbow walkways, I was telling Cheryl at our SOGI meeting this week, we ended up just again under the umbrella of empathy, and we view the rainbow colors as embracing diversity in the school. So we sort of took the BCTF sticker and we put our own little sentence along it that just says "Tout le monde est bienvenu ici," as in our doors are open to everyone, and not just about your sexual orientation and identity. But we ended up getting from Leon Signs pinstriping,
that was very inexpensive to go all around the doors of the school as you enter. And I think it cost us $50. It really wasn't that expensive, but it was it had high impact at low cost. And sorry, Monroe, I didn't ask for your permission. I didn't think you'd mind that. I could rip it off. I used to do signs when I was younger. You didn't like it. Yeah, so anyways, I appreciate you giving me the time to speak.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday and
birthday.
run away.
Till Toronto. Thank you.
Thanks. Scott and Colleen?
We do have technology.
Okay.
It's on Colleen's computer. She's gonna
Okay,
try
you wanna
it.
plug it in?
Yeah.
Do you wanna-
Do I share or do I have to plug in?
You can go straight to the TV. Do you know how to do that?
If I start talking before her technology, she's like.
Or you can just plug in.
So,
I'll look it up.
when you invite your alternate people to do a presentation, I hope there wasn't an expectation we'd fully follow script. We didn't feel we could talk about our framework without context. I mean, it took me a year in the seat before I punched those numbers.
Oh, you're hooked into Apple TV.
I have to unplug it.
So it took me a year in the seat, at least before I understood what the alphabet soup of acronyms was. And so we'll get to our growth plan, but that'll be on like minute 4, because I feel like we need to contextualize. So, yeah. So first of all, alternative versus alternate, and it's an important distinction in the industry. Alternative is anything different, anything that's not 5 days a week in a bricks and mortar school. Alternate, when we use the term alternate, it refers specifically for at-risk learners, but then open learning is the whole thing of alternative options, including alternate. Clear as mud? Yes, I think so. This next slide is, that's it, that's our programs. 7 geographical locations, and I know it's hard to read, and we will be happy to share this in digital copy with you afterwards, but there is 2 spelling mistakes in this paper version, so you don't get it. Everything on the right-hand side is alternate, alt-ed, at-risk learners, and then everything on the left is covered under distributed learning. And these are, again, there's acronyms all over the place, and I don't have an hour to go over them, but again, we have locations at every high school with 26 to 28 kids. We have a middle alternate program, we have one at Providence Farm, and then we have McCurdy, we have a yurt out in Cowichan Station where kids live and learn. In distributed learning, we drive, we get some mileage covering and going to visit all our different sites. But we won't into detail on those. So alternate, I'm going to talk about alternate, Colleen will talk about distributed learning, and then we'll kind of fessel. Alternate, it's important that we cover what it isn't. So it's not, if you're like a kid who just wants to do something different, you can't come to alternate. It's not just an easier way of graduating. It's not just for self-pacing and one-on-one help. If you're failing classes, but you like school and have friends and are happy and well-adjusted, the school will help you pass those courses you're failing. That's not alternate. It's not a place where kids are sent. It's not like you've been naughty, go away, you're going to alternate. All of our referrals are collaborative self-referral. And it's also important audit-wise, not for like, oh, you came up 1 credit shy of a grad, go to alternate, tidy up, and graduate. What it is, sorry, next.
It did. Oh, it didn't do it with me.
It did.
Is it being cantankerous?
This is my time.
It's not, I did it here. I can see it.
Really?
Yeah.
I could probably,
Okay.
I memorized it, and all that
Okay,
crap.
I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna.
It's meant to be for kids who've exhausted all options at the regular school. The regular school has said, school-based team, IEP, we've tried everything, things aren't working. There's careful screening. So they go through, Colleen and myself, there's an intake meeting. We have to check enough boxes for them to be alternate. complex social-emotional needs. Anxiety, mental health challenges, addiction issues, you're on probation. It's the gamut, but it's not just I'm not good at school. That's not alternate. Alternate is for those so complex. To be perfectly honest, most of our kids take 6 years to complete high school. They don't complete in 5 years. To be totally honest, many of them complete with an adult dogwood. It's less courses. It is a less stringent academic requirement. That is what it is, because the focus is on the socio-emotional, oh wow, here we go. The focus is on the socio-emotional piece, a student learning plan where every kid has goals, and now those goals may not include high school graduation. Maybe they need us to help get their life, get housing, and get a job. And right now, graduation's not okay. Our job is give them the best tools so they have a chance after grad for every kid. That's alternate. Our staff are not subject specialists. I'm not an English teacher at an alternate school. I'm an alternate teacher. I'm like a life case manager. Did you make your counseling appointment? Have you got a place to sleep? All of those things. What are you doing to manage your anxiety? You're not an English, I don't teach English at an alternate school. I'm an alternate school teacher, and there's a distinction. Also, our teachers manage grad plans, post-sec, linked with other opportunities. This fancy graphic, which just you can read, of course. This is we call it the butterfly, and it is the foundation of all we do. It was developed by the BC Ministry of Education. It's the 9 principles of alternate education, and it's deemed to be, so we adopted this from Janine Hannes at the ministry, and every single decision we make around policy, decisions, framework is measured against this. Because if something we're doing doesn't match with these philosophies that we've universally adopted, then it's not time, then it doesn't have a place in alternate. And now, yes?
The Butterfly was a working group created by Janine Hannes, involved teachers, students, and admin across continuing ed and alternative ed programs across the province. And it was about a 2-year process to come up with this. So it was ground up.
There you go. And now I'll take over this, and you shouldn't present from the front.
We're doing this? Okay. Hi. I'm Colleen Mullen. I work with Scott as,
You don't need Scott.
Sorry.
Okay.
We're being very alternate here.
I wasn't trusted with the clicker.
How do I point it? Do I point it
Anywhere.
somewhere?
Anywhere.
Oh, it's not set up yet.
Oh, it can't be identified. Oh, try now.
Okay, so say along the same pathway, what distributed learning is not. So there's some preconceived notations or preconceived perceptions as to what distributed learning was. It used to be a very much paper-based process. It used to be someone driving along in their train and throwing a box of learning out the train, and it rolled down the hill, and some kids came along and got it at logging camps in the middle of nowhere. That's what it used to be. It's evolved significantly over the years with our incredible team. We very much personalized it to our local community within the Cowichan Valley. So it's not just a bunch of students working at home and in isolation with their parents and submitting work. It's not subjects, specific silos of subjects anymore. Distributed learning is not teachers working in isolation either. We're all very collaborative, not only within house with each other, but also with our partners within other schools. It's not only designed for students that are very academically strong or gifted. It's not students working solely online, and it's not just teachers sitting in front of a computer all day long, because that would suck. So who are the Grove students? We have a wide variety of students that attend our programs. For designated students, struggling academically, behind academically, vulnerable students, we have athletes and artists, we have students in Japan that we're working with. We have students who are working, we have some students that are young moms. We have lots of vulnerable families within the program. We also do have some gifted students. We have everybody within the program. We have an athlete that's a motorbike expert. We have someone who's in California recording music right now in grade 8. How cool is that? We also have some students that started off in hospital homebound that are now full-time with us because they still cannot go back to school. So now this is a full-time, this is a long-term recovery. Maybe they're recovering from cancer, maybe they're still trying to recover from cancer. We have true home learners as well, that are families that are wanting to do it their own way and really embrace the different things that are in the Cowichan Valley and create their learning around that. And we also are bridging programs into alt ed. Lots of our students are not ready for alt ed yet, and so this is a bridging program, or we're using distributed learning to keep them connected. Okay, talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the, did I go back too fast? Okay, this is fast quicker. Okay, so specifically we have 2 different branches of the program, DL K through 9 and DL 10 through 12. K through 9, very much individualized programs. Many students attend up to 12.5 hours a week of workshops and classes and one-on-one help or little groups of synchronized learning. We have workshops every Wednesday, but we also have class times throughout the week that are cohorts of students, large diverse grades within those cohorts. It's a program that keeps many students attached to school, so we might be driving down to Cowichan Station or Drumworster's Coffee to meet with students on a regular basis because they still can't get into town or come into the building. Lots of cross-curricular instruction, and right now we have 119 students enrolled in the program. Maybe when it was presented to you a little while ago, it was probably around 35, 40. So we've grown, we're all grown up now. So 94 of those students are K through 7, and 32 are 8 through 9. So we're kind of bigger than a lot of our elementary schools within the district now. 10 through 12, another kettle of fish, a large proportion. We have 300 students taking cross-enrolled courses. They're at Kelsey, they're at Shemana Secondary School, and they're taking 1 or 2 courses, say by 12, because it didn't fit in their schedule. Maybe they failed it. Maybe they took Math 10 Foundations, now they need pre-calculus, and so they're doing one-on-one. We drive out to those schools on a weekly basis to check in with them in the counseling office in different places. We also have 74 students that are, throughout the year we have 74 students that are school of record, full-time with us on a grad plan. And we're sitting down with them constantly working and using work experience and helping connect them with Larry and careers and all of the other amazing stuff that we have in the district. They're also cross-enrolled at Cal High and other different schools. So I might be enrolled in the Grove full-time, but I'm doing climbing at Cal High. So we don't have a climbing program yet. Or they might be doing some really cool metal work at Cal High or whichever. We have a large number of students in there that are bridging into alt ed as well, and we have 20 potential grads this year. We've already graduated 2, so 20 more, and we'll be all graduating together at the Island Savings Center in June. Faisal.
And now we have no time for Professor because we like talking about our program. But what the framework
Remind us what FESL is?
What's that? Oh, sorry, abbreviation, Framework for Enhancing Student Learning, FESL. It's a nifty, because we like abbreviations, clearly, it's our thing. What the provincial framework for enhancing student learning did for us without the traditional kind of boxes that was in, enabled us to actually be able to look at the innovative learning environments and the educated system and knowing our learners. And for us, knowing our learners was key. So what we actually did was sat down in September and said, what if, and we know our kids, what if there were no grad requirements? What if there was no curricular requirements? What if there was no content that knowing our kids and knowing where they are on the educated system, where their deficiencies are, what they need, what would we actually do? Like, what would we teach them if no one told us what we had to? It's just like, okay, I know you're 16, and at 19 you have to leave. What are you lacking? What's the lagging skill that we need to address? And it's amazing when you start looking at it that way, the way that you can direct all your professional learning. So we've taken a step back from curriculum a little bit. And our staff have said, I don't know anything about addictions. I don't know how to tell a kid to deal with their, other than say, stop doing drugs, which is not an effective tactic, FYI. So that's where we're developing all our professional learning, is how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with depression, how to deal with addiction issues, how to make kids make better choices. And what's amazing with the new curriculum and the framework is you start taking all that meaningful learning the kids that are doing, you can find courses that fit all that and meet grad requirements too. Basic literacy, basic numeracy, and all the skills that they need to have their best chance. And so our framework is re-engaging students. I mean, that's, we do have, as Colleen said, we have other kids, but basically we don't have very many kids in our programs, whether they're DL or who are like, school's been great for me, I love it. I just want to do something different, because people don't do that. If it's working for you, you just keep doing that. So at some point, it wasn't working for them, we're looking to re-engage. You're clicking, right? So community, belonging, a sense of community, a sense of belonging, those individualized student learning plans, and these are our strategies we won't spend a bunch of time on, but we've changed a lot of what we do, and a lot of it has to do with what I mentioned before. We moved away from subject specialists, and we've really made people embrace the concept that you're not an English teacher at an alternate school, you're an alternate school teacher with a focus on English, because your job's the whole child, and it fits within our framework, and I would have loved to have talked about our framework more, but we went way over time. So thank you for letting us tell you about our programs.
Thank you, Scott. I just wonder if it might be worth just booting through those bullets.
Yeah, so what we've done is, for example, professional learning, we're behavior interventionists. So we embrace that, that's what we are. So Richard's working with us, UB1, UB2. All of our teachers being able to write IEPs for competing pathways, although they won't technically write them, I know that. But they can be knowledgeable and be a part of the making and creation of them and understanding the behavior intervention part of their role. We're also embracing more synchronous learning, because one of the things about alternate is that it's hard to build a sense of community when everyone's working in their own thing at their own time. So we're trying to build times and places that we're all still learning together as a community, even though it might be planning 10 for you and PE 10 for you and communications or English for you. We're still all doing that activity together side by side, and so we feel like a community. We went with learning cycles. So every 6 weeks we change it up, because we found that's our kids' stamina. About 6 weeks, and they need to switch things up. We're trying to design every kid's around their passions. So what are you passionate about is question one. Okay, let's see what we can do to design a program for you that enables you to do that. A lot of blending between programs where a lot of kids will have their foot in both programs, and a lot more kids with their foot in our traditional schools. We're doing a lot more kids who are with us, but like Colleen mentioned, doing a little bit of this down at Quam, or a little bit of that, a lot of partnerships there, and huge connecting with community partners. For our kids, it used to be, in CVOLC specifically, used to be that like Lisa and myself, our counselor, connected with the kids' counselors, and we were going to the ministry, we were going to ICMs, and now we're all doing that. So the teacher, everyone who's involved in the child's life, if they have a counselor, we're all collaborating, working, because like I said, it's kind of like it's like a life case manager. It's like making sure they're dressed, fed, loved, getting breakfast, going to whatever they need to support what their lagging skill is.
Wow.
So this is for all our programs. So the theme is creating a sense of community. We're needing to re-engage our students in social aspect, and finding opportunities for synchronism. One of the big shifts that we've had is potting students with a specific, not only one teacher, but we're potting them with 2 teachers. So then you're thinking about always having a student that says they have 2 adults that care about them. Yeah. So we've done that purposely. So now a student, if I'm in all dev, will go down and say they're in Daryl's room. Now they have Daryl and Sarah as pod people, and then we have Daryl as an expert in a couple subjects, and Sarah who's an expert in the other subjects, say math and science. And now they're working together to support the students. When one teacher is out doing some maybe spark work, maybe they're going bowling or doing rock climbing, the other student or the other teacher's there, so they're building really strong relationships with more people. And we're already finding we have significantly higher engagement within our program. We have way fewer kids that are like, where the heck are they? One class is 99% still from September. We have one, the lowest that we have is 70%, but at what used to be 50. So 70%, if that's our worst case scenario this year, holy man, that's big progress in 1 year.
So,
Distributed learning, we're doing the same thing. We're potted the students up instead of having every teacher responsible for 80 kids, which was great, it worked really well, but now there are 120. We need to really kind of narrow that down. So we've really narrowed it down. We're still group teaching, still creating lots of positive connections with adults, but we have one person that they're potted with. So we're really narrowing it down, but creating lots more synchronous opportunities too. So students are scared to be in groups, right? Because they want to be around 12 or 14 students, but now we're kind of making them dip their toe into that and be a part of more, well, for example, the community coming in, so we're having Discovery coming in and doing workshops over there. So Cowichan Valley Youth Services is coming in and doing workshops. So we're bringing the community within to the school. We're introducing students to counselors in a non-threatening way, creating synchronous learning environments where we're all learning and hearing the same thing at the same time. And we don't know which has been made most profound change. I think it's Scott being here. No, I don't know what made the most profound change, if it's the pods, if it's the community partnerships, it's really embracing the student learning plans. I don't know which it is, but I don't want to take anything away, because it's all kind of catching different people, and it's really cool, the changes that we're seeing. And so how will we measure it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
And
we're,
this is kind of a baseline year for measurement, to be honest, because all the metrics in previous years weren't applicable. So we're gathering all this data, and then that's gonna be our baseline, that moving forward from year to year, we'll hope to see each of these improve.
the one data we did use was how many kids fell off the radar last year for both programs. And we also know, we also know how we were engaging within the student learning plan. So it's like every student gets an IEP, what a student learning plan is. And every student across DL and ALDED all have student learning plans. So we wanna know how many kids were engaged in that throughout the year. We wanna know how many kids stayed engaged, connected. We don't wanna have any where are they nows. We want to measure course completion, how many courses were completed, but don't like that one. It's really uncomfortable. We're kind of arguing about that. We're having creative discussions around that right now. Course completion's awkward because we don't want to focus on that. We want to know that they're successful and healthy and having the best life chances. How do you measure that? I don't know. And then transitions, we want to see how many successful transitions we have. Could that be graduation? Could it be going back to Francis Kelsey? Could it be going from DL to CVOG, like getting a successful job and holding that for 6 months? Every student's transition is going to look different.
That was 5 minutes, right?
Yep, that was close.
All I just wanted to say is that I think what you've seen today is that by not giving a template and by really, and what the framework for enhancing student learning has really done, has allowed us to really focus on engaging our students. It's really allowed us to focus on student agency, and that it's also really allowing us to think about how those kids come in with all that curiosity, that they're also leaving with that curiosity because of the freedom that this framework allows each of the schools to individualize it for their school community. So you'll see that as each school comes, it's going to be very different, but huge impact.
And I think the other part that I'll just say, and it'll be very quick, is everything that Cheryl said about kids is also true about our staff.
Yeah.
It engages the professionalism of our teachers. Who's best to make choices about the kids that they spend their time with? It's our staff. They know the kids best. I think you heard stories from both schools. Know your kids, figure it out from there, get your staff engaged in improving life chances for kids. And then when this ceases to be a compliance exercise, then it becomes, it is super meaningful, and I think you've heard 2 stories of pretty meaningful. And trust me, we could have killed it. We could have turned this into a compliance, non-meaningful exercise, but with help from our union colleagues and lots of hard conversations, I think it's becoming increasingly meaningful for our schools to plan. You know your kids. What do you need to do to get to the next place?
Thank you, and thank you, Scott and Pauline and Cheryl, for taking us through this. I'm a person who has sat through for many, many years what school plans look like prior to now, and I can tell you it is 360. The former plans were very traditional and very inactive. They would be filed, everybody would tick off, and that would be the end of it. So it's very exciting to see we're down a new path, and I'm sure it will have tremendous results for our students and our staff as well, working together in that regard. So thank you very much. Trustee Croft.
Time for one trustee question.
Move very quickly. Over here, Trustee Croft.
It's for our presenters.
Oh, okay.
CVOG is very individualized and also sort of idiosyncratic, a lot of unique situations. Does that scale up?
Well,
You can answer another time.
Probably.
yes, and yet we we have the ability to be nimble in a way that a larger school at this time doesn't have. We've not really begun to plan course selection or assignments for next year yet, because we don't know our kids yet. But the large secondary schools are well underway with that process, so it's pretty hard to scale up. And again, I think bearing in mind that the mandate at the ministry level is that the mission statement of an alternate school is very different from that secondary school. We're tasked with that support above and beyond and socio-emotional, and that's, you know, when the auditors come, they don't want to see any kids in alternate who just want a little more flexibility in a smaller school. That's not the reason to be there.
Thank you. Superintendent and then trustee Dolman.
I think Scott was trying to get at a really important thing there. But as we have these conversations, especially with our secondary principals and staffs, it is harder perhaps to do it in a larger school. It's harder to scale up, but not impossible. What makes it often harder to scale up are the historic structures that we have built into secondary schools that we actually have no reason to continue to do. The new curriculum, the way things are packaged, the way assessment's moving, we're actually not required to put kids in boxes and move them, ring a bell and move them in groups of, pick a number. But that takes a while to break down. So we've had some very robust conversations with our secondary principal, with all of our principals, but secondary, what is the alternative part, and why can't our secondary schools be more alternative, offer more alternatives, which is a bit different than the alternate. And it's alive and well, and you're seeing it happening at all of our secondary schools now. When they come in and have this conversation, I think you will be surprised by the amount of flexibility and alternative feeling things they're able to offer kids that are starting to feel more CVOLky, which is brilliant. That's the goal.
Thank you. Trustee Dolman?
Just want to know what you do with all your spare time now that you're not preparing for an audit.
It's a little anxiety inducing. You get home at 5:30 and you're like, I'm done.
Well, thank you for going through the audits. We do appreciate that and appreciate the excellence that was shown in our districts. Thank you. Moving on, item 7, business and operations. To Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Sanchez.
Well, that's sort of unfair following all of that.
Good luck
really
with that, buddy.
Really exciting discussion.
Make people cry over the budget.
With budgets and enrollments and financial forecasts. But what you see on the screen here in front of you is the 3-year enrollment projection, which I won't take credit for creating. This is really the work of Karen that she led us through. It is the first step of the budget process. It was due on February 15th. We use a number of techniques in trying to estimate our enrollment for the next year. We first start by cohorting grades from sample grade 1 into grade 2. We look at historical trends. We look at historical transition rates. We look at the number of courses that a grade 10 or 12 might take. See, I'm clearing the room. We look at birth rates and the percentage of those students that we typically capture. And we do this for every single school, and it rolls up into this document. So there's a lot of work that goes into trying to figure out how many students we think we're going to have next year. And the summary is we think we will have just under 73 FTE increase into the next year, and some minor increases in our special education numbers. So that leads that now has been submitted to the ministry. They'll take that data and translate it into the funding allocation formula, which we'll then use we'll receive an announcement on March 15th. If there aren't any questions about that, I'll move on to the next item.
Any questions from trustees? Okay, thank you. Moving to item 7.2.
This is where it gets really good. So now we're heading into, we regularly bring the board financial projections and they get more and more accurate as we get closer to the end of June. We have less variation or less risk in our numbers. So the first item I wanted to bring to your attention is we see an additional $30,000 coming in under the provincial grant that does not reflect the February 1701 count yet. What that $30,000 is it is a recalculation on the average teacher salary supplement that you may have seen something come out through BCSTA that had happened. We've now taken that into revenue. We showing that in our tuition program in combination with our international program. So it's that line item captures both international as well as a cohort that's like the hairdressing and education assistance program where we charge and then pay for the cohort. We're about $47,000 over there. And then down a little bit under interest, you can see that we're already at budget on interest, so we've got about another $30,000 we anticipate. What's not included in these revenue figures that is significant, new information, is the employee health tax reimbursement, employer's health tax reimbursement. It will not be from January to June. It will be from April to June. So while there was a commitment to fund it, government has committed to funding it simply within their next fiscal year. So that was new information that was learned on Thursday. So as we were anticipating receiving potentially $680,000, we should now be expecting about half of that because it will only be for 3 months of our year. So that isn't brought in here yet because it hasn't yet been announced, but I anticipate that there'll be an additional $340,000 that will come into the surplus by the end of the year. So $131,000 ahead on revenue. Looking down at expenditures, again, there's some really big numbers there. In total, we're looking at $61 million worth of salaries. Just to walk you through there, right now we're projecting being over by about $19,000 on teacher salaries. That's on a $34 million budget. That's really close. Education assistance about $160,000 to the good. The one I want to draw your attention to is casual replacement illness / vacation. So we are currently projecting being over budget by about $437,000, and we've been talking about that through the last couple of projections. Sick leave this year, absenteeism has been very high, but it's also a factor of being able to replace our education assistants on a more daily basis than we've had the ability to do in the past. So through good recruitment practices and being part of and participating in the VIU EA education training cohort, we have more people, and that costs now. So it means that there's support for students, but there's a cost associated. So a good portion of that is related to not just the high absenteeism rate, but also to the ability to replace. So overall, that then shows our salaries are going over budget by about $172,000. We make up for that in employee benefits. Where overall I think we're going to be under budget by about $518,000. So significant there is we received a benefit premium holiday for our dental on our teachers, which basically means we paid too much last year and we got some of that back this year as a break by not having to pay premiums for a couple of months. So that's helpful, as well as utilities coming in under budget. Up to January it was pretty warm and things were looking really good, but we know February may see a shift of that. We had our snow and some cooler temperatures, at least recently, where we may see that come into our, although we did have 4 days with low power because we had our schools closed. That may help us on the utilities, on the hydro, and it may help us on our heat. And I think that'll also have a really significant impact on our absenteeism. So I know that when our staff came back after working 1 day and 10 days, that our absenteeism was not as high as it was, going into that snow period because people had a break, had a rest, and it has not picked up to its typical levels yet. So we'll continue to watch that. So if we scroll down just a little bit further, you can combine those two, the projected surplus up above of 131 in the revenues and the one in expenditures, and we see us coming in about $610,000 to the good on our budget, which then gets added to last year's unallocated surplus, which sits in contingency.
Sounds really good, thank you.
That's where we think, and again, we get more accurate as we move through, and we'll do one at the end of February and present that sometime following that, but it seems to be tracking quite well.
Thank you. Any questions from trustees? Okay. we're ready for budget assumptions 7.3.
Yeah, and I apologize for not having this ready in time to have it included in your agenda packages. So it's printed out on your, put it into your packages for you to read along. I won't read it all to you, but I will go through it. We have been working on the next year's budget, so as soon as we completed the one for this year, actually before that, we were already working on the 2019-2020 budget, so that's myself and that's Karen, and we have a new budget clerk, Alicia, who's kind of getting her, she's very, very new, and she's right away thrown into the budget's preparation cycle and is doing great. So the first part of my report here is really just to tell you that we have a statutory requirement to file a budget by the end of June, and you'll do that by setting priorities for the delivery of student learning. We'll be projecting student enrollment, which we've done. We project all of our costs, including inflation, into the next year. We have to determine what costs will change, number of students, anything that relates to contract changes, one-time items, and we go into detailed projections on our revenues. And then we also review the budget against the board's existing strategic priorities, and then we do some decision finalizing. So if we could roll over to student enrollment. So that data that we just presented, that work that Karen had been working on, gets translated into a grade by grade projection here of where we think our numbers are going to be. And if you looked at this document last year, you would have seen that 12 spike in grade 11. So there's a big cohort coming through. Grade 12 is also a year that more than 1.0 FTE is often taken as students enroll in dual credit and other options that allow them to have more than just a head count. So overall, you can kind of see that enrollments go up and they go down, but overall, we're starting to see a trend of the 8, 9, 11, 10, 12, those are sort of the smaller cohorts, 8 through 11, and they get kind of bigger as you get into your K. So that's where our enrollment growth is coming from. We think that'll be 73 students, and if we could just move to the next chart quickly. This is a chart of where we bottomed out and where we are now. So the 18-19 is the fourth year line down. That's where we are today, 8,061 students. The year after, we think 8,134, 8195, 8294. So you can see how we're almost starting to grow again and close to the pace for which we were declining over the last decade. So interesting the way that rebounded quite quickly. The next part is a chart on unique student needs, and you can see that has also been growing substantially. And we think that will begin to stabilize, so that's all the work of the Learning Services Department in identifying students and claiming them, and we're providing services for them. Now that certainly has implications in the existing collective agreement language around class size and composition, so the more students you have, the more teachers you have. Or may have, depending on the number of designations in a school. So again, you can see where that was a low number before, and it just kind of went, and that's where we had the audit, and now it's sort of stabilized, and we've caught up to where we should be. That's a level that is pretty close on a percentage basis to other provincial populations, where before we weren't. We were very low compared to the rest of the province. So bring that to your attention. The next section will just talk about some of the expenditures that we know are coming, that we need to be building into our budget. And the first one is just to talk again about the employer health tax, which is 1.9% of payroll for all employers with payrolls over 1.5 million. It's intended to offset the cost of medical services plan premiums for all residents in the province, and it's intended to be fully funded. So this year, I've just explained that it's not. For the year that we're in, the 18-19 year, what we're receiving is April to June. After that, it's supposed to be fully funded. After that, we know that the teachers and support staff collective agreements, they all expire this year. So collectively, the USW, CUPE, and the teacher collective agreements expire. And that bargaining is underway provincially. At this time, we don't build any percentage increases into the budget for those staff. That will be funded by government at the time of a settlement. We do know there's a provincial framework already, I guess it hasn't been fully ratified, but there's a provincial framework for the support staff that we can sort of estimate what the numbers will be, but we won't be building it in yet. Under not funded, our early projections, looking at, again, we have to build every school with class size and composition language based on the enrollment that we've done. So we have our school by school enrollment by grade. We have our designation projections in the same manner, and we have to then go about staffing our schools under the existing collective agreement language, because that's what we know today, to try to figure out what sort of space we're going to need in the next year. So having concluded that exercise, we think that we're likely going to need to be have 3 portables next year. It's hard to necessarily pinpoint. I have an idea of what schools, but to pinpoint that is still a little bit early. But I think we'll need about 3. So I'm putting that in because it's not funded by government. There will likely be an opportunity for principals, vice principals, and exempt to have further compensation increases. So if there's a percentage increase received by the support staff or teachers, that would likely apply potentially to principals and vice principals. We know that we've hired a lot of new people over the last couple of years, and they're younger and they move through the pay bands as they get their experience. So we know that our budget needs to reflect a bunch of people who will move from step 1 to step 2 or et cetera until they hit the top of their pay band. Usually that's about $400,000. I've spoken about the need to increase our education assistance absenteeism budget. It's simply not sufficient for the trend that we're seeing now, and we have more EAs because we have more designations, and we also have the ability to replace them in a more expeditious manner, or they get more. There's less vacancies in a day than there used to be. So we need to be thinking about that. Hydro rates are increasing. And another big piece is prep time for elementary teachers will be increasing by 10 minutes in the 1920 school year. That's likely about the equivalent of 2 FTE to provide that release time. And that non-instructional time, non-contact time. Other things that we'll be considering as we build the budget, or the board will be considering, is in the last budget there was a commitment, or we talked about doing a bit of a district clerical allocation review. The last one that was done was 2001, 2002. Karen's leading that project with a number of principals on board and other staff to really look at the equitable manner for which we're allocating our clerical resources among our schools. We're hoping to have some sort of report to bring back during the budget process. Past years, we've had a number of our trades position in the operating budget. We have a number of trades positions that are being funded out of capital, and at some point we need to start bringing them back into operating. That won't be sustainable. We only have so much capital work, although there has been lots recently with Mill Bay and other projects. But eventually that will need to be addressed. School supply allocations haven't been increased in a number of years. They're funded on a rate that's then calculated on a student FTE. We talked through our budget cycle last year about some of the maintenance vehicles and equipment are reaching the end of their service lives. We committed to bringing back a replacement plan for budget consideration. Started up with the new 21st century furniture budget this budget year. The board may wish to expand on that as we're starting to get proposals in for what that might look like. So doing some cool things with furniture in classrooms. We started our wellness program with the hiring of a wellness coordinator this year. A lot of the work that Gina's able to do comes from a grant from government that expires at the end of this year, so we'll need to fully utilize it. So we'll need to be thinking about how to continue to support that program, and it should be paying for itself. So we should be able to find funding through absenteeism costs, offsetting absenteeism costs. Certainly the demand for classroom technology increases as if you get more teachers and more students, then you have more demands in the classroom. We just went through our amended budget and restored some funding there. Early years education, I know, still remains a focus of the board. The transitional libraries to a learning commons space still requires support. We've been having some conversations about that at staff level. Many key managerial positions in the district will retire in the next year. So we need to be thinking about succession planning and how how that will look and whether we need to be overlapping some positions to, there's a lot of, I'm looking at the operations department, there's a lot of knowledge leaving there in the next, well, I guess it's 6 to 8 months, isn't it? And it's still, it's still a reconciliation with local First Nations still remains a priority, I know, of the board. So, what that means from a funding perspective, we need to work through. On savings side, the good news is that the employer health tax will eliminate MSP premiums in their entirety by January 1st, 2020. So that means we will pay half a year of MSP premiums, which are at half the rate of the old MSP premiums, but then we'll be off the hook, just paying the employer health tax, which we should get reimbursed for. Again, last year, the year that we're in, I'm speaking of it as last year, the 18-19 year, we saw quite a reduction in our pension rates for the employer's contribution to both the teacher and municipal plans. That was a half year of those savings, so those savings now run through the full year. The district also had in their budget services for a long-term facilities plan facilitator, and whether that work completes this year or not, that's just an item to have on deck. And we don't have an election, so we can take that out. They're held every 4 years. Thanks. So what we're left with on the revenue side, again, is just a very quick summary to let you know. Most of our money comes from government. It's quite easy to calculate what that will be now that we have enrollments. We can move through this slide actually quite quickly. But the part that we need to be really thinking about in the budget this year is the tripartite agreement, which will have implications for this budget cycle. So we know that government's going to recover from the board a portion of the operating grant, student location factor, and the transportation grant proportionally for the number of students that live on reserve. So some money is going to be withheld, and we're going to need to apply back for that money after developing transportation plans with the local First Nations that have students living on reserve. And those will have to be signed off by each band chief and the board chair. Moving to surplus, we used a lot of surplus to balance this year's budget. This is not the rollover items from the previous year, but just what we used to offset operating this year. And we started out with 1.8 million, and that grew to 2.458 as we bought portables and other things through the year. You can see that what the board has remaining is 963,000 of their unrestricted operating surplus, which I mentioned that there'll be a reimbursement of the employer health tax coming in still for April to June, which will the board will have the decision to leave in operating. But it's not, we don't have as much money in the bank as we did last year as we were going into the budget process, is the point I wanted to make here. So the next step is that we need to do this budget by June 30th. As we all know, we start by receiving our funding announcement on March 15th, and then we move into an extremely aggressive cycle of budget development, coming right away to following spring break to this committee. We will send out a survey, and then we will have a series of special meetings, advisory meetings, BEBC meetings, liaison meetings. April is jam-packed, which will happen parallel with bargaining, so it's going to be an extremely busy month. And then the board will consider first and second reading in the plan on June the 4th, final reading prior to June 30th. So final conclusions here are enrollments up, that's good. We will be building our budget based on class size and compositional language that exists now. We don't have any instructions that will be going away, or don't anticipate that to be going away. That currently supports 79 teachers and 10 EAs. We're starting the year with a good contingency, so we still are within the board's 1 to 3% contingency reserve, although there isn't a great deal available to help balance the next year. And that's the summaries and the assumptions for which we are starting the budget development.
That's an amazing amount of work that's been done, and thank you so much to Secretary Treasurer, Assistant Secretary Treasurer, and all the other people that have been involved. It is just at the beginning. We understand that, but there is a lot to consider in the budget. What you've given us is consideration.
Yeah, the team's been working hard to be ready for the announcement.
Yes, thank you. Trustee Croft.
I just want to say, I found your presentation very interesting. All those people who left early, they're losing out.
Exactly.
That's my report.
Okay, thank you. Moving to, through item 8 to item 9, committees, the advisory committee terms of reference revisions, trustee Crawford.
I read the revisions. There's one thing that isn't covered precisely as I had hoped, but it's pretty tiny. So I noticed that I had made a commitment at this table and at advisory to do a verbal presentation to the board as the chair, and I noticed that we don't have any wording in there for that gives the chair the option to present at BEBC. Can I sneak that in there as part of the motion?
No, you're on, are you not? I mean, this is your opportunity to present, is it not? Or I'm not understanding your question.
Are we trying to accept this as a revised policy?
Well, if someone so moves it to recommending to the board that they accept it.
But I would only recommend it with the item that states that the chair has the option to do a verbal presentation to BEBC.
And is that not here or
I don't
is
see
here?
it. Sorry, Madam Chair, I know I picked the last minute here.
Do you have a number that we could relate that?
Could I
to?
say, if there were a 7, pardon me, sorry. Okay, so it says the secretary treasurer will produce a written summary, circulate to all partners, and will present it to the board. I would just like to add 7A, that the chair has the option to present a verbal report to the board.
BEBC with the board. Are you not bringing it to BEBC and then?
Okay, at BEBC.
Okay. Secretary treasurer, you normally don't present to the board. So are we close enough to rewrite right now, or should we defer this to the next meeting?
If
Mr.
staff are
Sanford?
happy, I'd be happy with
Mr.
this.
Sanford?
Sorry, just a second. Yeah, I don't present to the
No,
board.
you don't.
It comes from the chair. It is included in the agenda, the summary, at the board meeting. So I do think 7 needs to be revised.
So we'll defer this to the next
Yep.
meeting then?
I think we can rewrite
Okay.
7.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we are on item 10, adjournment. Motion to adjourn, please. Trustee Thorne and trustee, as a seconder? Trustee Croft. All those in favor? Motion carries. We are at the end. Thank you.